Right now, Pittsburgh's best sports show is about to begin. Call us or tweet us. We've got things to talk about on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call.
Well, hey guys, and welcome into the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. I'm Cassidy Wood, your host tonight, joined by Chris Mueller. Chris, what's going on? Obviously, big storyline in Pittsburgh today, the final home game for the Pirates.
Well, I mean, Cassidy, it's nice to finally work with you on the Nightly Sports Call first off, but man, I don't know, that doesn't, it is like the number one storyline, but by the same token, it isn't, or I don't want it to be, because so much of what we saw for the last 2 months of this season, they pulled like a reverse Detroit Tigers, where they right now are 19-33 post-trade deadline. They were the only team who didn't try to sell off all of their assets to have fewer than 20 wins since the trade deadline. There's only 3 other teams beside the Pirates that have been that bad. And this game, for me, you know, it's kind of half-eye watching it, and then the rest of my attention was focused on doing the show, was just an encapsulation of everything that has frustrated fans most of the year that went wrong for them. Just a comedy of errors, balls dropping in, balls skipping by players, O'Neal Cruz forgetting how many outs there were. Really a unfortunate fitting capstone to what was a very frustrating season that is all but over now with 3 games left.
Yeah, Chris, I saw some pretty depressing videos today of fans, people interviewing fans about what they thought about this season. I'm just saying, you know, hopefully we'll be back next year, but isn't that the narrative that fans seem to have to say at the end of every season?
Well, I mean, my biggest problem is that I'm almost 40 years old. I vaguely remember the glory days of the early 90s. I obviously have a much sharper recollection of the 13 through 15 teams that were really good, that just didn't get anywhere in the playoffs. But so much of this feels like Groundhog Day. We are now 5 seasons into the Ben Cherington administration, and I don't think this team, they have some pitching. Obviously, Paul Skeens, I think, is the best pitcher in baseball. I'll give them a little credit for taking him over Dylan Cruz when that was a real debate. Jared Jones is encouraging, but I think there's things he's got to work on. Mitch Keller fading again at the end of a season. Luis Ortiz, he can be somewhat optimistic, but 5 years into the guy's tenure as general manager, and there are very few, if any, position players to get excited about in the minor leagues. So it's kind of a Groundhog Day refrain. This team has to win 2 of 3 to match last year's win total. They have to sweep the Yankees to exceed it. And truth be told, they're probably going to win 1 or no games in this series. So I laugh, and I just think of, like, I've had one thought pop through my head during all this, and I'm thinking to myself, at least we're not Oakland A's fans, but that is a very cold, that's a very cold comfort on a day like today.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the Oakland A's next. I'm not sure how big of a fan you are of the A's, but I mean, it's just so sad seeing their final home game out there in Oakland. I feel like the city of Oakland has just been, you know, not ripped to shreds per se, but when it comes to professional sports, almost so. I mean, they just have had every team taken out of their city, and it was just so sad seeing all those fans out there for that final game today.
I mean, that's greed in a nutshell, and I don't even know for a fact whether or not they're going to be able to get a stadium built in Las Vegas. I think Las Vegas's mayor originally said they should stay in Oakland and then kind of very quickly reversed course when certain moneyed interests said, no, we'll build a stadium, come on. Like, there are people who think that they might end up in Sacramento just in purgatory, but the owner, John Fisher, out there, just deplorable work. I really, though, like, you know what, I'll make a cross-sport connection. Everyone with UNLV football was up in arms about the Matt Sluka story, where here comes a guy who's their leading rusher, and they have a real shot to make the playoff, and that would be historic, and then he just pieces out and says, you made promises to me financially. They haven't been realized. I'm gone.
Right.
And everyone wanted to pick a side and say, who's the villain here? Well, the NCAA was the villain for allowing these things to happen and never even putting remote guardrails on any of this. Subsequently, or kind of across sports again, Cassidy, I would say, the real villain here is Rob Manfred and Major League Baseball and the rest of the owners who allowed this to happen. It should not happen. You should not have an American pro team relocating to another town in the United States. It's happening because baseball ultimately allowed it to happen.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more there. We are going to head to break here in a second, but when we come back, we are going to talk all Steelers. I know you guys are super excited. We do have a team to be really hyped about right now. Stick around. All right, welcome back. It's time for our GMC Sierra tweet of the night. This comes from Pro Football Focus, their passing grade on Justin Fields' first reads. As you can see there, quite the increase here in 2024 at 81.9. Last year, 63.7. The year before that, 55.2. So very impressive, but also not very surprising, I would say, with the way Justin Fields has played through these first 3 games. Sticking with that, just very exciting right now. The 3-0 Steelers are heading to Indianapolis on Sunday, hoping to stay perfect. Right now, just one of 5 unbeaten teams left in the NFL. I think what's going to be really exciting is to see this defense go up against this Colts offense on Sunday.
Yeah, I think that this is one of those games where I think in the NFL, generally speaking, when you think you know something or you think you've got a team pegged, then suddenly you'll get like a real surprise performance. Like it probably should have surprised nobody that the Broncos went in and trounced Tampa after everyone thought Tampa was riding high and Denver looked like it could barely play offensive football. And if you were like a certain bald-headed man who picked the Buccaneers in a survivor pool only to go down in flames, that feels even worse when you think about it in retrospect. I do think, though, the reason I bring that kind of like dynamic up in the NFL, Cassidy, is because Anthony Richardson has looked really, I would say, bad, uneven. He had the throw of the year maybe in week 1, but outside that, he has looked uneven. He's looked inaccurate at times. He hasn't really run the way I think that the Colts probably want him to. And so you'd look at that, you'd look at the Steelers' defense, and you would say, well, this is going to be, you know, Mike Tomlin and Watt and Fitzpatrick licking their chops. But I get the sense that it's not going to be that easy with Anthony Richardson in this game.
Well, I don't know. I mean, he currently leads the league right now in interceptions. He has 6 through those first 3 games. I think the number one task for the defense is obviously going to be stopping Jonathan Taylor. Their number one, you know, he has the number 1 yards. They go to him most of the time, and I just think that run defense is really going to have to show out, really stop Jonathan Taylor, and in turn that'll force Anthony Richardson to throw it. Maybe they can get a pick, you know, something like that. That's where I'm thinking.
I think that you also are looking at another situation here where you have a position group versus a position group that's a strength versus strength situation. Quentin Nelson is still on that Colts offensive line. Quentin Nelson is still a monster out there when he gets on the move, and I wouldn't call this a surprise per se, because I do think Keanu Benton is a star in the making, but maybe something that's been really heartening to see given the offseason drama about would he get a contract extension, is he going to stay healthy, does he still have something left in the tank? Cam Hayward has looked like the epitome of football dad strength through 3 weeks. He has been really good. He's been moving people off their spot. He's been dominating at the point of attack, and if you're like one of those, if you're an old school football fan and you love trench battles, I think this is going to be potentially a very good trench battle with Nelson and that whole Colts offensive line against the Steelers defensive front, because I will say, Indy's dangerous if those guys get going early and they're able to establish a rhythm with Jonathan Taylor. I don't think it'll happen, but if it does, then suddenly I would imagine Anthony Richardson's life becomes a lot easier back there.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that happening. Regardless, we did get quite spoiled on Sunday. You mentioned Cam's dad's strength. He had a sack. TJ had a sack. Nick Herbig with 2 sacks. I think they totaled 5, I'm pretty sure. But we got spoiled on Sunday. That was so incredible to see. So I think that's, you know, why they were named the number 1 defense this week. I think that's also why expectations are probably high when you put them up against this Colts offense that really hasn't looked great.
So one thing I'll say about Herbig, who has been obviously pretty revelatory in just how quickly he can get to a quarterback with the speed off the edge, the bend, the fact that he's not like a super tall guy, I think makes it even tougher when he's able to bend the edge, because some of these tackles simply can't get down and get their arms on him because they're too tall. It's kind of a rare inversion of the usual, you want bigger, stronger, faster. Well, Herbig's smaller and it works to his advantage. But I will say this. Alex Highsmith, one of the best things about his game, and he's not going to play obviously in this game or probably for a couple of weeks, is that he is a big outside linebacker, so much so that if he were ever on a team that ran a 4-3, I don't think it would be much of a problem for him to bulk up a little bit to play defensive end. And so you would imagine a team like the Colts that wants to run the ball is going to see a much smaller man in Herbig on one side here and try to target him, which is why the other thing, Cassidy, that I'm pretty interested in this game, like some of the little matchups rolling through my brain right now, I want to see how much they put DeMarvin Leal out there, a bigger guy, a guy who certainly, is obviously big enough to stop the run because he started as a defensive lineman. How and how much the Steelers decide to deploy him in this game, I think, is going to be a very nice little subplot to follow for Steelers fans.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. You did mention those injuries with Alex Highsmith, also Jaylen Warren. He was kind of limping a little bit in that Sunday game. Tomlin took him out, and he did not practice much of this week. He's not playing this weekend. Do you think that is going to affect the offense at all on Sunday?
I do think they have a nice insurance policy for Warren getting hurt like he did. And, I mean, it's obvious Harris has been running hard, not really efficiently, but I also wouldn't say it's totally his fault. I think the Steelers have been really committed to trying to run the football. They just haven't done a superb job of it. It's been kind of an interesting little, we're going to churn out 3.5, maybe 4 yards, and we're going to keep the sticks moving because our quarterback can run for first downs. But Harris is a good starting point. And then I do think you saw like the platonic ideal of what Mike Tomlin would like his offense to look like in the fourth quarter of that game. They had the Chargers on the ropes time of possession wise, and here comes Cordero Patterson, who is a nice insurance policy, running I think 4 times for like 33 yards in that fourth quarter. He's a guy in Arthur Smith's offense who Arthur Smith knows well, and I thought that was them imposing their will, and I think that's what they want to do in these games. And that's why, really quickly here, I would say it's probably maddening for some fans to watch the offense when it's not doing much early in games. Right. But they are absolutely trying to fight an attrition battle, and if they do that again successfully, the fourth quarter is going to look very similar.
Yeah, I mean, fingers crossed, right? I do want to get some callers here. We've had them sitting here. David from Finleyville wants to talk Steelers QBs, so very alongside with what we're talking about. David, what's going on?
Yes, thank you for taking my call. I want your opinion on if the Steelers get into the playoffs, who are you more comfortable with, Fields or Wilson? Thanks.
Well, I'll say this much. I mean, Jerry Dulac did share with us that Russell Wilson told him that he's feeling almost completely healthy. We could see him back at practice next week. But the question is, if Justin Fields goes into Indianapolis, comes out with the win, he's a 4-0 QB, I mean, I don't see Tomlin, even at that point, I see him riding that hot hand. I don't see him sitting Justin and then going with Russ that early. And then if Justin continues to win and they do go into the playoffs, at that point, you can't put Russ in there in the playoffs when he hasn't played with them the entire regular season. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen if they come out with a loss on Sunday. That'll completely change things. But if they keep winning the way they are, I don't see them changing up the quarterback position at all. What about you, Mueller?
If they get into the playoffs, Cassidy, whoever the quarterback is at the time that has gotten them in, unless it's like Wilson has to play the last game of the season because Fields got dinged up and it's Fields' job otherwise, well, it's whoever gets them in and has been playing the lion's share of the games. I mean, Wilson at this point in his career is a far cry from the guy who was challenging for Super Bowls every year in Seattle. The absolute best case scenario, I'll answer the question quickly this way. How are they the most dangerous in the playoffs? With a fully functional, fully developed Justin Fields, like a mature passing game where he can operate it. That is a team that can win a playoff game and maybe 2, because in terms of actual gifts to play the position, there are very few guys in the league with his size, speed, arm strength. Josh Allen's one, and I don't know how many others actually exist who have the raw talent, the raw makeup that Fields has.
Yeah, I agree with that. We are going to head to break, but when we come back, we're going to talk more Steelers football, maybe some college football too. Stick around.